Good. Awesome to see you, Randy.
Excellent. Great to be seen for sure. Everybody, thank you for watching. This is episode number 124 of Tech Sales Insights. Really excited to have Jeff Depa, the CRO at Gainsight, a company that probably just about everybody knows about unless you've been hiding. And we have a great title topic today, aligning customer success and sales. So it should be great. Also want to give a shout out to Convertive, who is our sponsor today. I think of them, if you go back to the days of kind of VARs and service providers, solution providers like you have now, but really helping you with your RevOps tech stack. They don't actually sell anything, but do lots of great advising and services from big companies like MasterCard all the way down to small companies as well. So if you need help with your tech stack, either it's too big and you got to want to cut your costs and get better productivity, they can help. Or if you need some help, they can also help. And also, as always, brought to you by Sales Community. So for those that are members, thank you so much. If you want to learn more and sell more, Tucker posted the link. So if you want a free membership, you can click on that link to get it. And anyway, so by intro, Jeff and I knew each other back probably when I had hair almost like him. So we're both at Sun Microsystems together. We figured out, we think around kind of 07, 09, but certainly knew him to have a great reputation, very focused on sales, very focused on partners. And, full disclosure, we probably lost touch and kind of reconnected last year. But I've got a couple great intros, and give a shout out to CEO Nick Maida. Of course, I'm prepping last night, and I say, geez, I got to get something better for an intro. So emailed him, and he was very responsive, and even had some back and forth, just clarifying some things. So your CEO says you are super diligent and an organized executor, best DIY, which is do it yourself, person you'll ever meet. Literally builds everything at home. A literal McGuire, loves a glass of milk. So that was that's pretty cool. So what have you built some cool stuff at home?
Yeah, if you walk through this house, probably 60 to 70% of the furniture is hand built by me.
Wow.
So love doing anything woodworking, anything around the property. So if it uses my hands and I get a tangible sense of accomplishment thereafter, it's a good thing. So probably the most recent was my kid's bed. He wanted a loft bed. So built him a loft bed up for his room. It's actually pretty cool. Even has glow in the dark steps on it. So
awesome, very cool. And then that's a rocket behind you that your son did out of Legos.
So my son follows in my footsteps. Loves the engineering, loves building stuff. That's a Saturn V, and he's when I was a kid and played with Legos, I would get a set and I would make it into like 3 instructions and then just build whatever I want.
Yeah.
He builds everything to the T, to the instructions, and does it super fast. So that was probably 3-4 years ago he got that, and knocked it out like Christmas Day in about an hour. And then he's like, well, I've got no place to put it, because he's all these shelves in his room that are already stacked with all these different Legos that he's built. I'm like, that's actually pretty cool. I love the Saturn V. So throw it up top there behind me. So.
Wow, very cool. And what's the deal with the glass of milk?
So I think everybody laughs. I do, like, if you look at what I drink, yes, I do drink alcohol, but during the day, like early in the day, it's a Diet Coke. Once I get into the afternoon, I switch to water. In the evenings, I get to milk. I still love skim milk. Like that's kind of my go-to drink. And we had actually had a happy hour, a Zoom happy hour in the midst of COVID one time. And I came on and it was mid-dinner time. And so I had a glass of milk, and everyone's like, why are you drinking milk? I'm like, I like a glass of milk with dinner. So now everyone thinks that I don't drink at all. I do love my red wine. But more often than not, you'll find me with a glass of milk, especially after I'm working outside on a hot day here. I know as gross as that sounds, I love it. So.
Awesome. Is there a favorite Oreo cookie or anything you like to dip, or just straight up?
Just give me straight skim milk. All good to go on that.
Awesome. Great. And then Subar Simeon, who's a good friend and a fellow advisory board member, says Jeff is one of those impressive people who not only has a great track record as a CRO with success in both very large and very small companies and everything in between, but he also manages an active life with wife, 2 kids, and 3 dogs, and probably a lot more. And not your normal list of hobbies, including private pilot, woodworking, which you just talked about, and playing the violin. So the pilot's impressive, but I think the violin's even more impressive. You really play the violin?
These days, I spend more time on the piano, and
Wow.
my daughter is the one that's cranking on the violin more these days. But I'm actually, super excited because they're doing a little bit of what I did in the past. Daughter on the violin, and my son next year actually starts trumpet. So I pulled out my probably 25-year-old trumpet out of the closet, and we got that all cleaned up. So he's going to start taking trumpet lessons, which is kind of cool to see. So.
Wow. Amazing, real savant there. And you live in Austin, Texas. Cool spot for sure. So you probably get inundated with UT fans and folks, right?
There's a lot of burnt orange around here. That's for sure. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, let's jump into the questions. So after Case Western, what was your first job?
So I worked actually when I was in grad school, and I was a software developer, and that was a great experience for me, especially given a kid at that age, and candidly, the comp for developer back in the day was pretty good on an hourly rate, and I definitely enjoyed the tech piece of it. But I got the lure of Silicon Valley, and if you want to talk about like my first official corporate job was Sun Professional Services. So Sun picked me up and was the mover of me from the Midwest out to California back in '99, I think, a long time ago. So it was joining Sun and Sun Professional Services, Sun PS West, and that was a really cool time back in that day because it was, I mean, think about what we worked on, like eBay when they did their V3 site re-architecture, PlayStation.com,
Yeah.
all the big ERP deployments when people are doing these big, tens of millions of dollar, large back-end ERP deployments. So lots of interesting projects that I got my teeth on back in the day at Sun and PS.
Yeah. And in '99, that's when Scott said put the dot in the .com, right? His son.
There was .com. There was, the what do you call it? The big frickin' webtone switch. And in fact, I still have on one of my personal laptops some old presentations that Greg Papadopoulos did, talking about in the future the consolidation into 3 or 4 primary compute centers, and kind of go back and look at those slides from presentations that we did. And they were all in open office or star office format. So I had to PDF them to actually keep them portable for a period of time. But, 25 years ago, talking about what today is Amazon, Google, Salesforce, kind of these core kind of compute centers that we all hook up to. So it's pretty cool to see a lot of Sun's, premonitions and where they thought the market was going actually come into fruition.
Yeah, great. It seemed like Scott was always just ahead of the time, but then eventually the rest of the world caught up. And then what about your career briefly after Sun?
Yeah, so from Sun to Oracle. So Oracle acquired Sun, obviously, as you know. So stayed with Oracle for about 5 years, running a couple different sales organizations or sales teams at Oracle. Branched out into the startup world, went a little bit in the NoSQL space. I worked at DataStax for a period of time. So one of the open source players behind Cassandra. And then moved on to LucidWorks as a CRO there for about 5 years. So LucidWorks is in the search and AI space, and spent 5 years there before coming to Gainsight. And I'm coming up on almost 3 years here at Gainsight.
Awesome. So Oracle, you probably did some work with Mitch Breen, Dave Donatelli, those guys.
Yep. Yeah. There was definitely 5 years. We had a few as we were integrating, and that was fascinating experience. When you look at one of, at the time, probably world's largest software company and one of the world's largest infrastructure companies coming together, vastly different cultures. And so just kind of navigating that and seeing how that happened. But then even seeing how Oracle grew. I mean, I remember one of my first meetings there where somebody asked the question, like, right, and there was an internal meeting, like, everyone raise your hand if you were hired by Oracle. Like, maybe 10% of the room raised their hand, because the overwhelming majority were folks like us that were hired kind of via acquisition and then, kind of grew up in that space. But yeah, 5 years there, learned a lot, definitely an environment that's super focused on execution. And, you talk a little bit about Sun, and Sun absolutely was a visionary. Definitely some challenges in terms of monetizing that vision and bringing that to market. But that being said, Oracle was, definitely the opposite. I laugh. I still have my Sun badge and my Oracle badge sitting here on the desk to the side of me. But learned a lot from both of those cultures, which is cool.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's amazing. Talked to Donatelli several times, but the model at Sun, you basically got to sell every month, every quarter. Oracle wakes up with a good chunk of their business every year, kind of already in the bag. So kind of that net new pressure just kind of allows you to have kind of much a longer term view, as opposed to, okay, what's our revenue, OpEx, and profitability? What's Wall Street want? Definitely a nice kind of smoother way to run your work life.
I will never forget the first quarter at Oracle, where there was this realization that after week 10, whatever we sell doesn't necessarily revenue. Because especially for an integrated system, you've got a big product, you've got a ship product, there's all sorts of different rev rec rules. And like you're given a forecast, and like, well, wait a second, why are you counting that deal? I'm like, well, that deal's going to come in week 12. Then we went down the path of blood builds and committing to build equipment.
Right.
Deal was in, and then it hit my personal comp if that deal failed to come in. So it was a fun time.
Yeah, and week 10 is if you're lucky, and now it's with supply chain, everything else, it's like crazy. Anyway, so very cool. And then how did you get to Gainsight from LucidWorks?
It was interesting when I was about 5 years at LucidWorks and built out and launched the CS function when I was there. So started and had a CS team and actually bought Gainsight. So I was a Gainsight user back in 2016, 2017. And eventually got the call, and I know we all get a lot of calls. I don't take many of them, but what was interesting about Gainsight to me is, that firstly, there's three things that I'm interested in, and it's people, culture, and technology, and it's in that order. So you mentioned Nick. Nick's a force. I think everyone, especially in the SaaS market, knows Nick, knows the culture that he's driven into Gainsight. But I will tell you, going back to, you asked me the question about the first job, professional services at Sun Microsystems. I'll never forget, there was a rep, actually sales leader at Sun, that once told me, don't confuse selling and delivery. And I always kind of scratch my head around that, because I'm like, look, if you can't deliver it, you're never going to sell to that customer again. Well, you look, in 2099, when you were doing a perpetual license deal, it's one and done. And maybe there's some services on the tail end. You can have that sort of philosophy. But as a services guy, like I had the philosophy that you have to go deliver an outcome. You have to go drive an impact for your customer's business. And so that's kind of followed me throughout my career. And when I got the call from Gainsight, I'm like, all right, like this is interesting. Like it's, amazing people, great culture, and I'm actually selling a tool that helps my customers deliver outcomes, and I'm totally passionate about outcomes. So boom, it's kind of kismet from that standpoint.
Awesome. Very, very cool. And for those watching along, you can, we cannot see you. You can see us or hear us. So feel free to make any comments or ask any questions. We got Tucker behind the scenes, and he'll pull those up. So please feel free here as we're chatting. So you already said a fair amount about Gainsight, but anything else you'd want to tell us about Gainsight?
No, I think, to your point, you mentioned it. I mean, Gainsight is the category creator behind customer success platforms. And, we're out there helping our customers grow through their customers, through their community, through their product. We've got a bunch of interesting stuff. So plug, next week, we have our Pulse conference up in Moscone. So great to be back in person. And we're launching some interesting new things, and I'll let the product team talk about that next week. But when you think about driving a personalized experience and ensuring that you've got the right call to actions for your team, and also leveraging things that we're deploying in our Horizon AI to just make your life and your customer's life more efficient. A lot of cool stuff we're going to go see next week. So super excited about that.
Awesome. And then Pulse, that's just the name of the...
It's Pulse Conference, and it is our 10th anniversary conference. So think about it as the big annual community get together for the customer success community.
Awesome. Very cool. And Vincent, thanks for chiming in. He says such an important topic. Absolutely. And Vincent, feel free to ask any questions. So you said a little bit there about AI. So you probably have been leveraging a little bit of AI, but I would imagine next week there's probably a bunch that you're kind of announcing or going to be doing around AI.
Yeah, I will say if you're not talking about generative AI right now, which is probably the most overloaded term out there, but the reality is it's super important. It's taking everyone by storm. But you think about how you can leverage that. And just over the last quarter or two, how I think those at the forefront have started to go leverage that tech. I'm on a number of like CRO community, some community emails even through different investors, and leveraging AI for meeting prep, leveraging AI for customizing emails and things like that. There's a lot of cool ways to go leverage that generative AI. We've got some interesting stuff coming out, and again, I'll let the product team talk about that next week and not necessarily preview it. But it's already built on top of a pretty strong foundation we have in what we call our Horizon AI, and so we've got a number of different features inside of Gainsight. Think about your customer health score. How do I actually optimize a health score and understand where I have opportunity for either expansion or risk of potential churn? And so we have AI tools that allow you to go optimize that health score, backflow test it, and determine, look, if I tweak this score this way, I'll have a higher confidence interval in terms of what my outcomes are actually going to be as it relates to retention, expansion, and cross-sell.
Awesome. And then with your sales process, what's your ICP? Because I would imagine anybody that has customers, which is everybody, kind of from an industry perspective would be everybody, but then kind of what are the kind of executive titles that you're selling to?
When you think about our core ICP, I mean, the center of it truly is, B2B SaaS. But you start to zoom out a little bit, and we've even seen this more recently in just the composition of our business, where nearly every legacy company out there, not all, but many, are turning themselves into quote unquote digital first companies. And I've got a number of different examples of like large agricultural producers that sell seeds and fertilizers and things like this, but all of a sudden are capturing all sorts of data around that, excuse me, and selling it back now to ag producers as a subscription service. So if you're reoccurring revenue, subscription-based revenue, or you moving digital first and want to ensure that you are driving an outcome and going to retain and expand that customer, Gainsight, customer success platform is something you absolutely have to have, something you absolutely have to dig into.
Wow, very cool. And then as you're going into some of those kind of new areas, like you said, the agriculture or others, and are you leveraging kind of a different channel or kind of partnerships to help there?
So, and I use the ag as an example of legacy companies that just don't want to give the impression that Gainsight's going into an agricultural business, not the case, but it's a great example of companies outside of our core ICP that, or at least core, B2B SaaS ICP that are kind of moving into the space as they go digital first and create these digital offerings, or they're acquiring companies that have a digital offering and need to maintain that engagement. In terms of kind of, the core channels for us, we absolutely have a fairly large partner ecosystem. And for us, you think about, another one of the overloaded terms, we talked about AI, let's talk about digital transformation. A lot of the large GSIs are focused on digital transformation, customer experience, and ensuring that you can both retain and then grow your customers. Absolutely critical. So engagement across the GSI standpoint. But also if you think about it, and we've talked before about kind of this tech ecosystem. So the integration points between a CRM, a customer success platform, a forecasting platform, a call recording platform, all the different tech stack kind of components that a CRO typically looks at. There's a lot of players that we have, technology partnerships, integrations with, because there's just a coincident type of go-to-market motion or parallel path from an ICP perspective.
Wow. And then what are the titles, kind of executive titles? So in that B2B SaaS, kind of who are the decision
for us? Really, the top is Chief Customer Officer. So CCO is absolutely critical. And CRO now is I would say almost equally as critical, because you look at, and this is one of the big questions that people always have, is where does CS report? Does it report into the CEO? Does it report into the CRO? It all depends, and it depends on your go-to-market motion and a number of different factors. But the reality is, in probably half of the instances, I'm meeting with myself as the person that's owning the budget strings that CS is either rolling into, or in many instances, like at Gainsight, for example, my CCO peer, Kelly Capote, she reports into Nick, our CEO. So I don't have the CS organization, but I do have our CAM organization. And that's the organization that's responsible for actually executing and prosecuting all our renewals and driving expansion and cross-sell. So there's a lot of different models that you have out there. So CRO is important as well.
Gotcha. So that customer success function, you internally there at Gainsight kind of break it up where you kind of have I'll say the revenue side, and then the CCO has, I call it kind of more the customer sat side.
Yeah, when you think about it, fundamentally there's a portion of it that's focused on adoption, and you sell a product. How do you drive the adoption of that product? how do you ensure that product's actually creating an outcome for that customer? When that happens, that gives us a couple interesting things. It gives me proof points and references to go into other customers and be like, hey, customers like you are already doing X, Y, and Z. Here's the actual stats in terms of what they're doing. So having my CS team drive that adoption, but then turning into potential lead flow through what we call CSQL, so customer success sourced, leads that come into my sales team for driving cross-sell and expansion.
Gotcha. Very cool. And then how do you differentiate kind of a CCO from kind of a CRO in terms of how you guys kind of split the responsibilities?
Is that from a Gainsight perspective, or are you thinking from an industry perspective?
I'd say both, kind of Gainsight and then kind of what you see.
Yeah. So Kelly, who's our chief customer officer, like I said, she owns our entire customer success organization. That's inclusive of our CSMs. She owns our support organization, and she owns our professional services organization. So when you think about kind of the customer life cycle from onboarding forward, that falls into Kelly's remit, where everything else falls into my remit. But again, I also have the renewals aspect of it, and I also have the expansion and cross-sell into all that existing customer base. Like the key challenge in CS and sales overall is just alignment, and making sure that each team is supporting the other team. Because look, if we didn't have 1,000+ existing customers to go cross-sell and upsell into, be a massive impact on my addressable market and my business. So we need to keep that new customer, new logo acquisition, machine going, but we also have to nurture and grow that install base. So we both work together, super well.
Awesome. And then how does marketing report in?
So marketing, so my peer Monica rolls into Nick. But again, these are all, very tightly integrated from the standpoint of when you think about customer marketing. And this is a conversation that comes up in a lot of our customer engagements now these days, where it's like my CS team probably has the best visibility into what's happening in the market and what's happening, in our customer base. And so marketing, having the ability to go look between what are we doing within CS, and then what are they doing in Marketo in terms of going after new prospects or marketing into our existing customers, really, really key to have alignment there. We use, and everyone gets confused when I say this externally, we use Gong. And yes, we use Gong.io, which is the call recording tool, but we call our internal Gainsight instance Gong. Gong is short for Gainsight on Gainsight. And this is, we probably, and of course you would expect us to have the most thorough and complete deployment of Gainsight. So the entire company leverages it, from my marketing team to my sales organization to our post-success team, post-sales and customer success team.
Gotcha. And then anything that you can share around either your kind of go-to-market priorities or challenges that you're having?
I'd say right now, a couple things. We are, if you look at Gainsight as a company in terms of where we go to market, North America being the biggest core for us, like most other SaaS companies. We've got a pretty big presence in Europe. We started that 7 years ago-ish, probably. And so Europe is a big market for us. We just, and I say just, it's been probably a year now that we've been in the process, but we've opened up Japan. And going into the APJ market, with definitively more force and more resources, and localizing and internationalizing the product to be able to go tackle that. So global expansion, one key for us. I'd say the other, and if you look at Gainsight and what we bring to market, and you probably heard me use 3 words where it's like grow through your customer, your community, and your product. One of the other core motions for us right now is actually a cross-sell motion from a go-to-market perspective, because everyone knows Gainsight for the core CS platform that we brought to market and we've had for years and years and years. But we've done 2 acquisitions in our history. One of those is what we now call Gainsight PX. So this is product experience. So think in-app analytics and engagements. And this is a key part of how you actually ensure what's your customer's journey, and where are they actually adopting the features that are sticky, that are driving the most value, where are they not? How can you guide them in-app? So it gives us a great capability to help customers drive product-led growth. And we also acquired a company last January, so January of last year, 2022. So we're a year into it now, called Insighted, which is a community platform. And really tying all this together is a key motion for us of both driving cross-sell, but also bringing things like digital customer success and a complete DCS offering to market. Because when you think about it, providing customer success at scale requires you to do it through your product. It requires you to go leverage the intelligence and visibility that a customer success platform like Gainsight can give you, especially through in-app analytics. But it also requires you to do things like self-service, leverage your community advocates. And that's what the Insighted platform and that community platform have allowed us to go build over the course of the last year. So it's really those three kind of, fundamental pillars, and ensuring that we can go drive a cross-sell, go-to-market motion.
Awesome. And I know you've got a great culture. Glassdoor said Gainsight got the top spot for best places to work. What are maybe one or two things that make the culture special?
Start at the top. Nick, you probably got a little sense of him and kind of what he's done, but I think that's really important because, look, we've all worked at a lot of places. You all seen a lot of people talk about culture, but more often that culture is a poster on the break room wall. And that's the only time that you see those things or hear about those things. And everybody kind of laughs about it when somebody does something that's completely, averse to what that culture actually is. Nick is super serious about it. If you look at Gainsight's mission statement, it's to prove you can win in business while being human first. And we take this human first thing super seriously. In fact, before I joined, Nick and I had multiple hour-plus long meetings around what does it actually mean to be a Gainsight executive and live the values, and think about those values in terms of every decision that we make and how we go drive the company. So when you look at our core values, a focus on being human first, the other one that I really love is childlike joy, because it's about bringing your authentic self to work.
Let's just say it again.
Childlike joy. So
Joy.
it's key to us to look, in everything you do, you gotta have a little bit of fun. But it allows everyone to kind of truly bring themselves to work. And it's great to see all of that being celebrated. And it just makes it for a much more integrated and just positive esprit de corps for the team. And so culture here, I think, Gainsight, for sure, obviously I've got the best place to work award behind me there, but it's not me, it's our entire organization. And it starts with Nick and how we drive it through the community as well. And you'll see it. For those that, if you're out there and you're going to Pulse next week, I think people can attest, you'll see that culture come through in our conference as well.
Awesome. Very cool. And then I guess about a couple of years ago, you had a private equity shift with Vista coming in. Kind of what was that like from a CRO perspective? Because you probably had a lot more kind of eyes on you, so to speak. They say a lot of help.
That's the question that I always get. And in fact, so Vista, we did the deal with Vista and it closed December 28th of 2020. So it was probably, I was not here that long, and candidly, a chunk of my time, my early time at Gainsight was going through that diligence process. But I will tell you, here's what was great about it. When I spent probably 6 months plus, talking to Nick before making the call to go join Gainsight and going through the interview process, I put together, kind of my assessment of here's kind of the core areas that I think we need to focus on as it relates to go-to-market, things around enablement and a number of different things. And what was really fascinating is when we went through the diligence process with Vista, at the tail end of that diligence process, they came in and they said, look, here's our value creation plan. Here's the areas that we think you need to go dig into and that we want to go focus on. And, literally all but I think one that they presented were on the list that I had created before I even joined the company. So that to me was a great sign, because if it was orthogonal, it probably would have been the shortest CRO tenure of my career. But the reality is they've come in and it's been great. Everyone's like, oh, private equity, it's got to be tough. It's not. I've seen some of the other ones that perhaps aren't quite as human first, but from a values alignment perspective, Vista's super aligned with Gainsight. And in fact, they've leveraged what we've taken from a culture perspective and seeing how they can push that across the rest of the portfolio. So seeing that and seeing their mission focus, and then the fact that a lot of their core areas of, hey, here's where we need to dig in were aligned with mine. It's been good. And I'd say the second part of it that to me has been a big plus is the CRO community. They had a what they call Vista BPSS, their best practice sharing session. Did that in Miami a couple of weeks ago. And just a great opportunity to get in a room with a bunch of fellow CROs. There's no competition. There's not people trying to elbow each other out in terms of, whatever the dynamic might be. It's everyone's in there. We're all kind of doing the same thing in different companies, seeing different problems. And I assure you, somebody that is facing the exact challenge that I had last year, or the one I'm having now, somebody else saw last year. And the ability to leverage that network has been super compelling as well.
Awesome. Very, very cool. And all right. So, also I forgot to ask about Japan. So you got new things going on in Japan, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned, international is a big focus for us. We launched that. I mean, it feels like a year and a half now, but when I think about official launch, we're probably a quarter and a half in, but there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, firstly, just deciding on that market, number one, and then from there, moving on from that, deciding on the market to how do you actually go do it? How do you localize the product? How do you bring a team on board? So how do you build the demand? And so we've partnered with a company called Japan Cloud, who've been fantastic for us. They brought a number of other SaaS companies into the market. So it's great to get to a point now where, we're closing deals. We've got a fully built out team and just a lot of local excitement in the market there.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely tough one to break into, but if they get the right relationships and feet on the street, certainly can be great. All right, Tucker, we have a question from Tim. Can you talk about how important data collection is to B2B SaaS? We often see product and marketing teams struggle with prioritizing instrumentation of data collection, like segment, et cetera, and product in other areas of the customer life cycle. Where am I here? To feed tech, like CS and PX.
Yeah. So we made the acquisition we're 4 years in now, ish. So we made that acquisition years ago because this is absolutely so critical. Understanding, and actually when I read this question and ask about data collection, B2B SaaS, and talks about segment, I'll talk about two things around data. One is actually understanding your ICP and having a data-driven way to go understand that ICP. That's absolutely critical because part of customer success starts with selling to the right customers. So we've got a pretty detailed process. And in fact, this is one of the areas that Vista doubled down on with us. And internally, we've gone across the market. We have a pretty detailed algorithm that scores accounts based on demographics and firmographics and all sorts of other data to determine, are they within the ICP and where are they ranked within the ICP? That then gives us what we call a territory net potential model, where we can build out based on all the different potential prospects in the ICP, based on tap rates and conversion rates. What's the actual net potential of this market area and going to business? Now, that's a key piece of understanding your market from a B2B SaaS standpoint, because it should drive decisions like, am I going to make this feature shift in product or invest in engineering here because a D-graded account wants it, or because it's an A1 account that's got a significant amount of cross-sell? Understanding kind of what you do and how it impacts your core ICP, absolutely critical. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it, though, and this is again why we acquired the product and why we are driving PX so heavily across our business, is really the analytics and the understanding of how your customers are actually using your product. How can you actually drive an outcome if you don't know how they're using it? You don't know where they get stuck. You don't know where perhaps the sticky features are. You can't help them through that process. Now, historically, it's something that heads of product have cared about. And in fact, when we first bought, PX and brought it to market, our core focus was going after the chief product officer. But as over the course of the years here, it's evolved where the heads of CS now see that they have to have this data, and regardless of whether product wants it or not, it's getting injected. Those tags are getting injected into the application. It becomes just a critical part of health scoring and understanding that customer journey and understanding how we can go, potentially drive more, both value for that customer, but a more valuable symbiotic relationship.
Awesome. Very cool. And Tim, thanks for the question. And then while we're on it, how's your, I'll call it, lead gen process?
So I think, I already mentioned next week we have Pulse, which is probably the largest customer. It is the largest customer success, community event out there. Obviously a great opportunity for us, both from a lead perspective, but but also from a progression standpoint. I think when you go to, conferences like that and you see, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of your peers in the room facing similar challenges, but also making similar decisions, it's a great opportunity, at least as a sales leader, selfishly, in terms of driving progression and opportunities. So I think, the Gainsight brand is synonymous with customer success. So we've had a very, very just rich kind of top of funnel activity coming off of our branding, and then all of the core marketing that our team does. They do, talk about childlike joy. We've gone through what we called an ERAS tour. And if or Eras tour, and Taylor Swift just did her Eras tour. Nick happens to be a big Taylor Swift fan, so we kind of modeled and did a bunch of multi-city tours. But it's really pulling together local leaders from the CS community and tackling some top of mind topics and activities. And I would say for us, thought leadership and giving back to the community both builds the category, but it's also a massive amount of lead flow. And then outside of that, of course, I have my sales organization and an SDR organization focused on outbound prospecting and ensuring that, people have the appropriate awareness of Gainsight.
Awesome. There may not be SDRs watching now, but probably off hours are going to watch. So if there's kind of one or two bits of feedback or advice so they can end up in your shoes someday, what would you tell them they should be doing now?
Yeah, great question. And I will share some advice I got early in my career, and it was the words, deserve it before you demand it. And I think,
you're talking about the 20 somethings, right now. I thought they're only supposed to demand it even if they don't deserve it.
Yeah. It's been an interesting market. I do think the shift in tech here in the last couple quarters may change some of that. And by the way, it's not to say don't be ambitious, and it's not to say don't go advocate for yourself. Right. But I had a leader, a son, many years ago tell me that, and it was like, do the job that you want to go have. And it's not to say neglect your current job, but when you think about an SDR and typically how they're compensated, and it's focused on just building pipeline, but is it quality pipeline? Is it pipeline that's closing? Is it aligned with the objectives of the company? How can you then step up as a leader, as an SDR, and say, man, here's the scripts, here's the sequences, here's what I'm doing that's working, that we need to go drive across the organization. And I would say the last piece about that, especially in the SDR shoes, I think this is part of the organization that if you get it right, firstly, it's incredibly hard because it's the intersection of marketing and all demand into the sales team. And then the question is like, are we building enough leads? Are these actually qualified opportunities? Should they be progressing? How do you actually move from production to coverage? And I know everyone has these challenges, and if anyone gets it right, like I would love to know like how you got it right that quickly, because the business and the market shifts. But being able to understand what you do and how it relates to your sales team, incredibly important.
Awesome, very cool. All right, so great discussion, but the title topic is aligning customer success and sales. And I would imagine you kind of have a framework or kind of structure to how you think about that.
Yeah. It's super hot right now. I think, one of the things that's been really, at the forefront, especially over the last couple of quarters here, is this concept of what we call durable growth. Because when you think about it, a couple of years ago, growth at all costs, right? We can go capture and pull in any revenue that we want, but durable growth is really about how do I grow? How do we grow consistently? And how do I do it profitably? And do that the right way. And it really requires great orchestration across your entire customer lifecycle. And, I would say, the most fundamental aspect that when you think about kind of the intersection of customer success and sales, it just orientates itself on the concept of delivering value and outcomes. So for us at Gainsight, we've created, we have both a kind of a post-sales and a pre-sales process. And we've got a very focused, what we call kind of the Gainsight human first value selling methodology. We've leveraged force management. We've leveraged a couple other, tools and techniques and tools out there to go build that. But we've aligned this end-to-end process with what we call O2. And you have to have a fancy acronym, and O2 short for operationalizing outcomes. And what this really means is every one of our sales processes starts with a value hypothesis. And so based on what we know, based on the other evidence we have in existing customers of value, every one of the reps has to determine like, look, here's the outcome that I expect to drive. And value is really built on a number of different things. It's what do I think that outcome is? How do I measure it? What's a rational metric for that? What's an appropriate timeline? Putting all that stuff together, reps build that value hypothesis. That value hypothesis turns into a success plan, actually automatically in Gainsight. So for us, we use Salesforce. That moves from Salesforce into a success plan. And that goes into our adoption team, who's focused on, all right, here's the outcome that we sold. Here's what we're trying to go deliver. We're going to put the right workflows and processes in place to go enable that outcome. And then our customer success team is accountable for driving that outcome. And when they achieve that, we call it a VO, a verified outcome. And this turns into a great flywheel because every one of those VOs then can feed back into the sales team, either as something we can use in another similar customer, or, when you think about it, once I've driven that level of adoption, customers on board, they've seen that first value moment. There's a great thing we call customer success SQLs, where we find opportunities for cross-sell, for expansion within the account, just based on driving that verified outcome. But having that framework, that O2 framework, it's critical because you need that common language, because you've got a broad set of customer needs. You've got all these different and extensive product capabilities. How do you actually attribute success to Gainsight and to the solution that you're bringing to market? And how do you prevent like a lot of our, generally speaking, the market I've seen it a number of different times, customers go in, they buy something, then the post-sales team comes in and says, okay, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, wait, we just spent the last 6 to 9 months with your sales team or the SE team or this or that. And then the post-sales comes in and they've got a different set of templates and a different set of onboarding tools. And it's like, wait a second, like I just lost all that time. So having that framework is absolutely critical for us.
Awesome. Then how do you incent around that?
Yeah, so it's a great call. One for our CS team, they actually have a compensation component that's tied to number of verified outcomes. So they are heavily driven towards ensuring that whatever that outcome is, we actually go achieve it, and it goes back into our verified outcome database to ensure that customer is getting value, because ultimately, again, it's about value. Sales organization for us, fairly standard kind of compensation plan for the reps in terms of overall bookings, but there's a number of different things that we've put in there in terms of driving both longer term deals and deals that demonstrate that they're using more of the platform, so that we can bring as much value to the customer as possible.
Awesome. Very cool. So moving on, what about advice for people breaking into tech sales? Maybe name one thing.
Advice for people breaking into tech sales. I'd say just what I talked about there for a moment is you got to bring value and passion. And what's awesome about Gainsight is it's around driving outcomes. So it's a product that I can be passionate about, because it's something that from my early professional services days back at Sun, it was really, really important to me. So whatever you do, be that expert. And this is an old line. I forget where it came from. I think it was maybe one of the Challenger things. Be the doctor, not the drugstore, right? Your customer goes to a drugstore when they've got a headache, they know they need a Tylenol. But when they don't know how to go solve that problem, they go to the doctor. And your ability to go do that and really be an expert within your domain and within your space, absolutely key.
And then next, what about advice for those in recent tech sales? Again, maybe one thing.
Learn how to use ChatGPT. I don't mean to be flippant about that, but I do think if you look at where the industry is going, just understanding the impact of these new technologies on these roles, absolutely critical. Like you gotta understand how to use it, because you're going to be impacted in some form or fashion. And then, the other thing I'd say, like again, it's to be a common theme. Go back on where you can go drive value for customers, and if you can focus on that, you're going to prove your weight in gold.
Awesome. Really, really cool. And then we've certainly, back in the day when I had operating jobs, we had, it was sales ops. Now it's really rev ops. It really does, does so much more. What are any of your kind of, I don't know if I'm allowed to say favorites or kind of tools, obviously Gainsight, but any others that you're passionate about?
Yeah. So for us, Gainsight, our Gainsight and Gainsight instance is absolutely critical for a number of different factors for the team. The other one that I'll talk about for a moment is we've launched what I affectionately call Air Dashboard. So activities, indicators, and results. And it's really understanding how you can go drive a run of the business and map those ultimate bookings all the way down to what are the day-to-day activities that, whether it be an SDR, a rep, or some person in the organization, need to go execute. One of the things that we use to help go drive that is Atrium. So Atrium is a great tool. So Pete, who's the CEO over there, and also runs Modern Sales Pros, great guy, great tool, gives me really interesting visibility into everything from activities. And so you look at what happened over the last couple of quarters with a massive shift in the tech market space. Atrium can pick it up in terms of rep activities, and you can kind of see what segments are being impacted, how and when they're being impacted. So it's really, really key to get those analytics and drive it into action.
Awesome. Cool. And then I think your tech stack is also kind of Gong, Clary, 6sense.
Yep. Got all of those. Salesforce, fairly probably standard, but very varied tech stack like most CROs out there.
Cool. All right. Well, Gong's a sponsor, Sales Community. So I'll let you give them a shout out, kind of what you think, how they're helping you.
Yeah, I mean, we leverage them. I mean, another great example for Gong, especially in light of what's happened in the market recently, is sentiment analysis. So we started looking at, keywording certain things that came up in our sales calls, like recession, economic uncertainty, things like that. And you can start keying off of that and see when what we're seeing now, impact certain segments, and then how to respond to that. The other awesome thing about Gong that I would call out, one of the sales tools that we've put in place along the lines of, in our value selling processes around trap setting questions. And when you think about getting your sales team on board with exhibiting a new behavior, you've got to, show that behavior working. We've been able to go back and look at calls where our reps are leveraging some of these new techniques and then show that they have a higher close rate. A very marked different in close rate when you're using the tactics and the tools that we put into place. So another great pitch for a tool like Gong there.
Awesome. You said there was trap selling questions, or what was it?
Trap setting questions. So it's a force management concept.
Okay.
And really what it's about is when you're out there engaged with prospect and you are trying to differentiate, how do we do something better? Well, you need to differentiate against someone else. And so it's not necessarily about, let me call it the competition and say that they're poor at this, but it's asking a question where it's like, do you need a complex, multi-product model to support your business? Something like that. And the reality is certain competitors can't go do that. So you're asking a question where they're digging into their requirements and surfacing a requirement that is going to disqualify your competition. So they're trap setting questions.
Wow. Very cool. And amazing. You think back, 10 years ago, I say you had the, LinkedIn and Salesforce was a big deal. Now, all this stuff that's available, it's, almost like cheating.
Yeah.
So now you're in the catbird seat of the sales tech stack space. So, look down the road, kind of, 5-10 years, any bold predictions?
There's definitely going to be some consolidation, and definitely consolidation driven on what's going on in the economy right now. But I think, you have these buckets that have been historically separate and are starting to come together. Great example, and not that I'm predicting anything here, so don't read in, but think about customer marketing and what your marketing team does with Marketo. And I talked early on, based on, I think, Tim's question around understanding your core ICP. Well, who knows better about what's happening in your customer base than Gainsight? Right. So how do you align the data between marketing and customer success to ensure that you're doing the appropriate account-based marketing, the appropriate targeting, hitting people at the right moment with the right call to action? So, I definitely see all these spheres coming together, and I've seen it more now, even with, CS and sales, because, 8 years ago, it was, customer success was something you needed when, okay, I'm starting to lose some customers. I've got a leaky bucket, so I just got to work on shoring that up. But in very short order, you recognize you have to get proactive. You have to go out there aggressively, and CS is a great enabler to do that. So I just think the merging of the entire customer life cycle and the data analytics around it, it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, be interesting. You think about kind of how the ERP vendors, we had Informix, Sybase, PeopleSoft, and it kind of basically blended into an Oracle and an SAP. But you can kind of see the same thing where they're kind of, maybe there's a Gainsight and a Gong, and everybody else basically gets gobbled up or goes away. But Yeah, who knows? I won't ask you to comment, but obviously Gainsight, yes, would be a monster player
Yes,
in that space. You can agree with that.
100%.
And then what on the training side? Because that's certainly you've got kind of early in career sellers, you got later in career sellers. So are there anything special that you do there? Leveraging internal resources or external? I think you mentioned Force before.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give a shout out to Kelly Jarrett, who runs our enablement and ops team now. So she came on board and is, yeah. So she's built out just an amazing foundational enablement program, and it's a number of different factors. From we do weekly sales scoop calls, we've got sales academy sessions on a monthly basis, and just having just a consistent muscle for the appropriate content, getting into a centralized spot. Getting it engaged throughout the organization. It's just been a great process that she's built into play to ensure that we not only have an onboarding routine, because look, the first thing you do when you set up enablement is like, how do I get reps onboarded and ramped? But then you realize it's a continual ramp, because I'm asking them to do very different stuff this year than I was last year, than I was the year before. As we shift more product, the market changes. So using that foundation to now just being an ongoing mechanism to give people, the latest and greatest in terms of tools, strategies, and tips to go out there and crush it.
Awesome. Very, very cool. And what about any one or two examples of sales leaders that you respect?
When you go across, I'd call out some on my own team. Jim, Murph, who's our head of North America. Great guy who's worked his way up from rep and one of our strategic reps all the way to running the Americas for me. Kev, who runs my European business, great example of somebody that's come on board, built something from the ground up. And it's really important, like we talk about culture already, but just the culture he's built around the Gainsight team and the esprit de corps for the European team has been key. So I'll call my own leaders. Like if I look historically, you've got John McMahon from PTC and some kind of the early sales leaders and all those different methodologies and kind of values that they've espoused. That's definitely an area that I look to. The other, and this probably goes back to the first value selling methodology that I actually really subscribed to was Challenger sale, Challenger customer. And then more recently, so Matt Dixon wrote The Jolt Effect. We had him at our kickoff. I'm sure you've probably read The Jolt Effect, just great book and, great focus on, how do you, there you go. I love it. But things evolve and adapt, and you have to evolve and adapt, and thinking about how do I de-risk this buying process instead of doing the same thing that I'm always doing, which is we've got a really good ROI. I'll go back and look at ROI. I'll throw you more data around that ROI as opposed to how I reduce that risk, because let's face it, customers buy when they have confidence in themselves, not necessarily just you.
Totally. Awesome. Last question. Any advice you would give your younger self? Looks like you've mastered everything: family, work, your interests, everything else. So that might be
look, there's probably a lot that I would give myself. Not taking yourself too seriously. Balance is really key. Don't put off to tomorrow what you can do today. And you can think about that in terms of your career, but you can also think about it in terms of your family and your life. And this is where, human first becomes, incredibly, incredibly important. I had a very dear friend, fellow CRO, passed away unexpectedly about 8 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And, you look at the stress that all of us are under in tech, in this industry. And it really, it hits home, and it makes you kind of think like, why are we doing this? And ensuring that everything you do has some sense of purpose to what your greater good is. Really, really key to keep a focus on that, because I have my moments, and I think we all do, where you get so heads down and you kind of forget about that. And then you realize, man, that is super important.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, you've been an amazing guest, super impressive. And it's great to say I knew you way back when, but you're on an amazing track, and the future somehow can only get brighter. So it's very, very cool. So thanks for that. So coming up next week, episode 126, we have Mark Stevenson. His topic is going to be go-to-market alignment, one team, one go-to-market for efficiency and leverage. And then Monday, May 22nd, we got the legendary Tom Mendoza, who was early on at leader at NetApp, eventually vice chairman, and a whole bunch of great boards. West Point and others have him come talk on leadership and culture, so I know he'll be great. And then that college in South Bend has his name on their business school as well. So thanks to Convertive for sponsoring. For those that are not members of Sales Community, feel free to join. And those that are, thanks. And most importantly, Jeff, wish you best continued success at Gainsight.
Awesome, Randy. Great chatting with you.
All right, thanks. Have a good one.